Good afternoon, class. This is lesson for justice and fairness. Now, as an introductory discussion, what form of injustices around you that you have observed and came to know from different sources? So, in reality, in our life, we experience injustices. So, ano-ano ba yung mga injustices na naranasan ninyo when you were in elementary or high school, or those forms of injustices in the government or in our community, in our locality that have been part of the news. Now, example of these injustices, 3 years after President Rodrigo Duterte took office in June 2016, his war on drugs has killed thousands of people, largely from impoverished urban areas o yung mga mahihirap na nakatira sa mga urban areas. What we call extrajudicial killings by police and their agents have continued on a regular basis. So because of this extrajudicial killings, marami yung naging biktima dahil dito sa war on drugs campaign, especially in Metro Manila, into other cities and provinces. The impact of the drug war includes not only loss of life but damage to the livelihoods, education, and the mental health of surviving family members. Now, when we say extrajudicial killings or executions, this happens when someone in an official position deliberately kills a person without any legal process. So walang legal na proseso, basta-basta na lang pinapatay ang mga pinaghihinalaan na gumagamit ng ipinagbabawal na droga. The state have a legal obligation to protect the right to life. Such crimes must be therefore investigated and their authors be prosecuted. Now, another example of injustices happening in the Philippines is that in our Philippine society, we have seen the institutionalization of a culture of impunity. So the culture of impunity where those who violate the human rights of others are able to escape investigation and prosecution. So the meaning of impunity is the exemption from punishment or freedom from the injuries consequences of an action. So the impunity enjoyed, ang pinakatot nga is the impunity enjoyed by military officers implicated in civilian killings. So yung mga military officers daw, hindi sila nagkakaroon ng pananagutan to their injuries sa pamamagitan ng pagpatay nila sa kanilang mga biktima. So there and then, nagkakaroon sila ng numerous or several civilian killings. Now we are here on slide number 5. On slide number 5, of course, when we will be studying justice and fairness, hindi mawawala ang mga technical terms such as equity and equality. Now we will get to know the difference between these two technical terms, equity and equality. On slide number 6 is contains the definition of equity and equality. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same amount of resources or opportunities. On the other hand, equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances or situation and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So there you go. The difference between equality and equity is that sa equity, kinikilala yung circumstance or yung sitwasyon kung saan involve ang ating mga subjects or those individuals that you wanted to help. Meaning, if you recognize the circumstances or the situations involved, that means that you are focusing on the problem and then comes the solution towards the problem. While in equality, there is no recognition of circumstances or situation. It's just that the positive thing in equality is that you provide or you give the same amount or the equal amount of resources or opportunities, and that's it. In the illustration that I will be providing you in the coming slide, two individuals have an equal access to a system. Our system is signaled or presented in the apple tree. In this case, the tree that provides the fruit with equal support from evenly distributed tools, their access to the fruit still remains unequal. Why unequal? Because you will be seeing the example, the sample illustration on the coming slide. The equitable solution, however, allocates the exact resources that each person needs to access the fruit, leading to positive outcomes for both individuals. So the only solution which is very effective and efficient to the case scenario is the equitable solution. Once again, when we say equitable solution, there is a recognition of the circumstances or the situation for you to magnify on the need of the subject or of the individuals that you wanted to help, or the individuals or the subject needing the resources. Now on slide number 7, still moreover about the difference between the equity and equality, while the tree appears to be a naturally occurring system, it's critical to remember that social systems aren't naturally inequitable. So in reality, at all times, not at all times and not in all aspect, there is always the presence of an inequitable solution. They've been intentionally designed to reward specific demographics for so long that the system's outcomes may appear unintentional but are actually rooted discriminatory practices and beliefs. So ang sinasabi po dito sa slide number 7, in reality, hindi at all times merong solusyon na ibinibigay ang gobyerno, meron ding solusyon na ibinibigay ang ibang tao. Hindi lang natin dapat laging sisihin ang gobyerno. Pwede ring maging subject of failure tayong mga individuals. Now, not at all times we could provide solution. Merong mga criterias or demographics, issues and concerns na kailangan nating isipin. Equity is a solution for addressing imbalanced social systems. Now, equity could be a solution para masolusyonan natin yung mga injustices and also the imbalanced social systems that we have. Justice can take equity one step further by fixing the systems in a way that leads to long-term, sustainable, equitable access for generations to come. So we are to think of the next generations to come. If there is a lot of existence of problems and challenges happening right now, just think of it, what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years for the incoming generations. So of course, mamanahin din nila yun mga maraming problema at kailangan marami na rin tayong solusyon by now para sa pagbabago ng ating panahon. Now, here on slide number 8 contains the two pictures, one picture from above and one picture from the bottom. Now, the question here is which picture is an example of equality and which picture is an example of equity? We have further discussed the definition of or the meaning of equality and equity. So dito po ang picture na nasa taas ay picture of equality. Why equality? Because there is no recognition about their need or about their situation or the circumstance that they need a material for them to, a certain material for them to get a fully access regarding the resources that is offered by the apple tree. So wala pong kinikilalang sitwasyon dito sa picture na ito. Kung ganun po ang ating iisipin, therefore, this is an example of equality. While the picture below is an example of equity. Why equity? Because as you could see, there is already the presence of a certain material that would help them access the resources from the apple tree. So since there is the recognition of the material that would clearly, effectively, and efficiently help them towards their access on the resources or the opportunity to bag certain numbers of apple, it is therefore this picture is an example of equity. But how about this one? On slide number 9, you could see something, a different picture from the previous picture that I have presented. This is clearly an example of justice. Why justice? Because you have seen yun itsura ng ating hagdanan, the height of the stairs that was used or the materials that was used for these two kids or these two individuals to access for the resources. So clearly, this is an example of justice. Now, moreover, let me present to you a sample lifelike situations or scenarios for us to better understand what is the difference between equality and equity. An example of equality is that a community meeting where all members of the community are invited about a local environmental health concern. So that will be the topic of the community meeting. But here's the situation is held in English, though English is not the primary language for 25% of the residents. The situation, the circumstance was recognized, but there's no actual solution to solve the dilemma, or there's no actual solution to solve the situation. So if there's no actual solution to solve the dilemma or the problem at hand, that is clearly an example of equality. So here on the next sentence comes the solution to the problem. So if there's a solution to the problem, that's clearly an example of equity. Let us read: the community leaders hire translators to attend the meeting or offer an additional meeting held in another language. So clearly um, there was an acknowledgement of the problem and the solution to the problem at hand was presented. So yung mga community leaders nag-hire ng translators. If that's the case, then that would be a perfect example of equity. Now on slide number 11, moreover about justice. Justice means giving each person what he or she deserves, or in more traditional terms, giving each person his or her due. So if you are given any kind of treatment or services that you deserve, that means justice. While justice and fairness are closely related terms that are often today used interchangeably, marami pa rin daw nalilito sa paggamit ng mga technical terms such as justice and fairness. So let us study and discuss further for us to be clarified regarding its difference. While justice usually has been used with reference to a standard of rightness, fairness, on the other hand, often has been used with regard to an ability to judge without reference to one's feelings or interests. Fairness also have been used to refer to the ability to make judgments that are not overly general but that are concrete and specific to a particular case. So when you are after morality, when you are after doing what is right in a given situation, then you are doing justice, or you are providing justice in the case scenario. But if you are after for giving a generalization or a conclusion or a judgment, and then the way you do the judgment is that you do not refer kung ano yung mararamdaman ng isa at ano rin yung mararamdaman ng isang ng kabilang panig, then that is fairness. Because you do not refer to what they would feel and to their personal interests as well, or to your personal interests as well while making the judgment. So that would be clearly an example of fairness. So here in slide number 12, in fact, Most ethicists today hold the view that there would be no point of talking about justice or fairness if it were not for the conflicts of interest. So in the previous studies that we had, we talked about conflicts of duties. Now, in this lesson number 4, we are talking about conflicts of interest. Now on slide number 13 comes the definition of the conflicts of interest. Conflict of interests is the incompatibility of objectives or concerns between two or more individuals or organizations. Conflict of interest occurs when two or more different interests are involved in a single pursuit. So let's say, for example, if the governor wants a specific project in a locality, he must talk to the mayor. But if the mayor has a different plan regarding his own locality of leadership, of course, the governor will be in charge or will be in command. But what we are saying or presenting here in this case scenario is that the different desires or the different plan or projects that the governor and the mayor wanted to pursue with their locality. So that mainly is an example of conflict of interest in a single pursuit. So the conflict of interest doesn't only occurs between two individual desires, two individual interests, or two individual plans, but it could also happen between two or more different interests, two or more different desires, or two or more different plans for a single pursuit. Now here on slide number 14 comes the principle of justice. It says here that the principle of justice is the principle that equals should be treated equally and unequal unequally. So it means that you will be treated good if you are a good person, and then you will be treated bad if you are a bad person. In a layman's term, the explanation for this is that individuals should be treated the same unless they differ in ways that are relevant to the situation in which they are involved. So for example, if Jack and Jill both do the same work in a company, they are co-workers and both of them do the same work, they have the same duties and responsibilities, and there are no relevant differences between them or the work they are doing. Then in justice, if we're going to be talking about justice, they should be paid the same wages. But here comes another scenario. If we're going to be talking about injustices, Jack is paid more than Jill simply because he is a man or because Jack is a white American. Then we have an injustice. An injustice is any kind of discrimination about your race or about your sex or gender. So because race and sex are not relevant to normal work situations. So in reality, it really happens. But as a supporter of justice and fairness in our society, we do not judge a person based on his or her race or her gender preferences or any kind of factors that he or she personally chosen. We form any kind of judgment based on his or her performance. Now, on slide number 15, moreover about the principle of justice, there are, however, many differences that we deem as justifiable criteria for treating people differently. So minsan, okay lang naman na magkaroon tayo ng ibang trato sa ibang tao. We accept the fact that there are, at times, there are justifiable criteria for treating people differently, such as we think it is fair and just when a parent gives his own children more attention and care in his private affairs than he gives the children of others. So okay lang kasi sarili niya yung anak. Another example is that we think it is fair when the person who is first in a line at a theater is given first choice of theater tickets. We think it is just when the government gives benefits to the needy than it does not provide to more affluent citizens. So halimbawa, mas inuunang tulungan ng gobyerno yung mga nasa class C at class D society, yung mga mahihirap, especially the poorest of the poor Filipino people, more than those who are affluent o yung mga mayayaman. So we think it is fair and just. Another example is that we think it is just when some who have done wrong are given punishments that are not meted out to others who have done nothing wrong. So based from an injury or a crime that you did, you will get the same amount of punishment to compensate for your harm. As we progress on this study, we'll talk more about the types of justice, and then we'll talk more about how justice is achieved through those kinds of punishment. Pero on the other hand, there are also criteria that we believe are not justifiable, hindi katanggap-tanggap, for giving people different treatment. Examples are that we generally hold that it is unjust to give individuals special treatment on the basis of age, sex, race, or their religious preferences. So it's not really advisable for you to judge people based from their age, sex, race, or their religious preferences. We therefore want to appreciate and not discriminate. If the judge nephew receives a suspended sentence for armed robbery when another offender unrelated to the judge goes to jail for the same crime, or the brother of the director of public works gets the $1 million contract to install sprinklers on the municipal golf course despite lower bids from other contractors, we say that it's unfair. So sometimes in reality, as I will say over and over again, we witness injustices. We also believe it isn't fair when a person is punished for something over which he or she had no control, or isn't compensated for a harm he or she suffered. So really, injustices happens. Now here on slide number 17, I will be presenting to you the different kinds of justice. There are different kinds of justice. The first type or kind of justice is what we call as distributive justice. This refers to the extent to which society's institutions ensure that benefits and burdens are distributed among society's members in ways that are fair and just. So meaning, in distributive justice, the distribution of goods, services, or responsibilities is based on productivity and merit, social utility and public interests, need and ability, equal opportunity, ownership of property, entitlement, and free choices. So clearly, in distributive justice, there is an attempt to share out the good and bad things amongst the member of society as equally as possible. So example, ano po ba yung mga halimbawa ng mga good things na dinidistribute sa mga members of society? Example of good things are the wealth, power, and freedom, or even the recognition of your rights. Example of bad things are the burdens and duties such as taxes and to be subjected to restrictions over one's property. Now, here is the illustration for our first type of justice, which we call as distributive justice. Now, on slide number 19 comes the second important kind of justice or type of justice, as we call it retributive or corrective justice. Retributive justice refers to the extent to which punishments are fair and just. In general, punishments are held to be just to the extent that they take into account relevant criteria such as the seriousness of the crime and the intent of the criminal, and discount irrelevant criteria such as race. So here in retributive or corrective justice comes an evaluation of action. An evaluation of action is done based on the crime committed. Here, the penalty inflicted on the wrongdoer is the same as the wrong or harm he did. Retributive justice corrects an imbalance or any kind of injustices that has been made to restore order and reinforce rules. So through the power of the punishment that will be enforced to the crime doer, which is equally amounting to the pain or the loss of property he did, the main goal or the main objective is to correct everything or to restore order and reinforce rules once again. Now here is an illustration of the retributive or corrective justice, the different kinds of justice. This is, in general, punishments are held to be just to the extent that they take into account relevant criteria such as the seriousness of the crime, the intention. Diba? We talked about yesterday the power of studying the intention or the motive of the person. Here, pinag-aaralan naman yung intention or the motive of the criminal, why he did such act, and also the discount irrelevant criteria such as race. Now, the third kind or the third important kind or type of justice is what we call as compensatory justice. Compensatory justice refers to the extent to which people are fairly compensated for their injuries by those who have injured them. Just compensation is proportional to the loss inflicted on a person. So clearly here in compensatory justice, this concerns restoring a harmed person what he lost when someone wronged him, because it is a belief that a person has a moral obligation to compensate an injured party only if three conditions pertain or was met. The first condition is that the action that inflicted the injury was wrong or negligent. The second is that the action was the real cause of the injury. The action or the crime was the real cause of the injury, and that the action or the crime that inflicted the injury was really wrong or negligent. And the third is that the person did the action voluntarily. So there was no force, there was no threat behind the criminal in doing such crime or doing such action. So the formula is that the amount of compensation is equal or must be equal to the loss of reputation or to the loss of property. Now is an example is that if some person killed another person, or if a person killed another person, then the family of the killed person will ask the killer if he gave the equivalent amount of money that they demanded, then they will forgive the killer and never gave him punishment. Why? Because it means that the amount of money demanded by the grieved person is already considered as a punishment. Sa ating lengguwahe, ito yung tinatawag natin na daños perwisyo. Nagbibigay tayo ng equal amount or halaga ng pera mula doon sa halaga ng property or halaga ng dignidad na nawala sa atin. Now, here is the illustration for compensatory justice. In summary, projected in slide number 23, these are the types of justice that we have learned. We have discussed the distributive justice, retributive justice, and the compensatory justice. In slide number 24, the foundations of justice can be traced to the notions of social stability, interdependence, and equal dignity. Meaning, if you will look or study further about the improvement, development, growth, and stability, kung laging powerful ang isang bansa, ibig sabihin, that that country or that society has a very strong foundation of justice. As the ethicist John Rawls has pointed out, the stability of a society or any group for that matter depends upon the extent to which the members of that society feel that they are being treated justly. So more likely, the society or a certain kind of community, group or organization will last if there is a foundation for justice, meaning all members of that group, organization, community, or society doesn't feel that they are treated wrongly. There is no um, unjust treatment, and there is an equal opportunity or provision of resources. Then there comes stability. In slide number 25, justice then is a central part of ethics and should be given due consideration in our moral lives. We must ask whether our actions treat all persons equally. If not, we must determine whether the difference in treatment is justified or the criteria we are using relevant to the situation at hand. So meaning we have to be conscious and cautious at all times regarding our words, regarding our actions, regarding our behavior. If the way we treat others is fair and balanced, or if it is not fair and there's no balance at all in the treatment, in the way we treat others, are the differences in the way we treat others justifiable? So we must ask that depending on the situation at hand. So nevertheless, justice is an expression of our mutual recognition of each other's basic dignity and an acknowledgement that if we are to live together in an interdependent community, we must treat each other as equal. So I clearly support this thought or this idea. I clearly wanted to encourage each and every one of us to treat others or to treat everyone or everybody as equal as possible. Now, on slide number 26 comes the three discussion questions. I want you to once again meditate on these three discussion questions and answer it by yourself. What do you think must be applied in the Philippine system of government in urban areas? Would it be equality or equity? How about in rural areas? I have distinguished situations. I have distinguished urban areas and rural areas, as we plainly know that there's a lot of differences or situations or circumstances happening in urban areas and in rural areas. Now, considering those differences, what could be the proper approach? Would it be equality or would it be equity? Now, on question number 3 lies, what do you think is the best applicable form of justice in the Philippines? Would it be distributive, compensatory, or retributive type of justice? Now, that sums up our lesson number 4, which is entitled Justice and Fairness. Once again, right after we have discussed the lesson number 3, comes this lesson, lesson number 4, Justice and Fairness. So you could expect quiz number 5 tomorrow. Maraming salamat, and I hope you learned something new today about this topic. If you have any question, our GC is always open for your questions. Any concerns or clarifications you might have, please write it down in your GC. Salamat. Once again, this is Felipe Busa Jr., your ethics teacher. Thank you and have a nice day.